have a complete human skull. All teeth are preserved, and it's quite an amazing person. The size of the jaw really tells you that this was a much more robust individual. Big brow ridge, big prognathous face, and I'm quite sure that the debates are going to rage about whether this is just a big male or whether this is a different species. But people in my profession love to argue, especially if they don't find their own fossils. So, next, please. And the postcranial bones, the rest of the body, are beautifully preserved at Dmanisi as well. This is a shoulder blade, a scapula. Last year in the new test, we found a complete human pelvis, which is quite unusual. We have students, Herman Ponzer in particular, who has reconstructed the whole leg and the foot, found out that even though they were small people, the architecture of their foot and the mechanics of their walking and running were almost exactly like ours. So these people were excellent runners and walkers, which was a very important aspect of their anatomy. Next, please. So, the Dmanisi people had small brains, but more and more I'm convinced that they were not stupid. Stupid people don't survive out in the wilds like they did. They were small in size, but they were good runners. They had very strong hands, as we know from the big stones they carried to the site and the napping, making of stone artifacts that they did. And I threw in a conservative comment that they must have had very strong family values, so that their social bonds and the social group that they must have had, I think, were essential for their survival in this harsh environment. Next, please. So this is Dr. Lorkikadidze, and as you can see, this young woman would not be much of a match for him in any kind of a confrontation. So they must have been this small. It's obvious to anyone that they must have had some advantage that's not evident in their bodies. And when we look at their simple technology, their lack of fire, etc., we know that probably what gave them the ability to survive is what really defines the human species, and that is our social and kinship relations, working together as a group. Next, please. Now, this was the real competition that those people had. This is one of the biggest cats, and it's an extinct cheetah that we have in Dmanisi, and I scaled these photographs. So this cheetah was big, weighed over 100 kilograms, and was fast. So the question is, how does a little person like this survive on a landscape that has predators like this? Interesting and very difficult question to answer. Next, please. So, how did they survive? What were they doing? And how do we find out? This, of course, defines archaeology and paleontology and the strategies that we use to try to answer questions about what these people were actually doing. Next. So, the goals of our excavations have been quite traditional ones. We want to find out how much of that promontory is covered by archaeology and how deep the deposits are to give us a feeling for how many times people came to that location. Secondly, and we do this by doing tests all over, which I'll show you. Secondly, we choose areas to do full-scale intensive excavations. That wasn't very difficult to do in the early years because when you find a human skull, you want to dig more in that place. But now that all the excitement about the human fossils is kind of tapered off a little bit, now we've really been focused for the last years on the archaeology, on the record of behaviors at the site. And we do that by finding artifacts, their positions in the site, and as well as the animal bones. So this takes a big team of experts, of paleontologists, people like my friend Martha Tappan and Maya Luksadidze, who study the animal bones, not only to identify them, but to tell what happened to them. Were those animals killed by carnivores, is there evidence that the humans butchered the animals, and we have cut marks, and we have breakage patterns to show that they were actually processing all the many species of game at the site. And I'm not going to go into great detail, but we also have a great group of people working on reconstructing the environment, studying fossil pollen to give us the vegetation, and we have thousands and thousands of animal bones, from elephants all the way down to little rodents that are all good indicators of what the environment was like. And the geology and soils work that we do helps complete that picture. So we really have a good idea of what the environment looked like that these people were adapted to as. So, in order to define the whole space and the stratigraphy of Dmanisi, we have dug test pits all over the promontory. This is where the first skulls were found, and this was a location of major excavations. This M5 is where Teona and I are excavating now. I'll show you that. But everywhere we have excavated on the promontory, we have found archaeology, and lots of it. So this was my first test in the M5. You can see it's just a small trench to expose the stratigraphy, the layers of sediment, and to recover artifacts and bones. Next, please. This is what we call M9, and we dug this one in 2010. It's 220 meters from M5, from the one I just showed you. And it has the same sequence of deposits, 6.5 meters of layered volcanic ashes, all containing bones and artifacts. So Dmanisi now, next slide, allows us then to correlate all of these geologic sections from the promontory and to reconstruct the surface of the earth and to reconstruct where the sediments were accumulating and where artifacts and bones are preserved. Next, please. So, as of today, we have defined more than 20,000 square meters, that's 2 hectares, of in situ archaeology, in-place archaeology. That's a huge site. At any time period, that's really the size of a city. I call this an old Stone Age Manhattan. It's almost that big. So from this size, just from the scale of the deposits and the archaeology that they contain, there's no site anywhere in the world that has the same extent. So that emphasizes this very important place on the landscape that the Dmanisi hominids use. Next, please. So then we've done excavations. This is where everything was started. This is where the first jaw was found. This is where we've been digging for a long time. And in this block here, the green part of it, we found about 70 human fossils. We have human fossils from here at M6, and off in the distance, last year, another 70 meters away, I did another test, and that's where we found the human pelvis. So we have human bones over hundreds and hundreds of square meters at the site as well. Really unique. Next, please. This is M5. This is the new excavation that we're doing following that test, that trench that my son was in. And it's a 25 square meter block. And this picture was taken in 2010. We've gone down much farther now. And M5 has 7 meters of stratified deposits, all containing artifacts and bones. Next, please. So this is the profile at M5, and these are the different stratigraphic units that we've named. So everything you see in this picture contains artifacts, and many of the layers contain bones. It's an incredible site, really. Next, please. Of course, one of our goals in excavating is not just to define the sequence of events in time, but also to look at space, to look at the use of space by these people. So these were not finished, but you can see we have really nice clustering of stone artifacts showing that these are places where people sat down and manufactured stone tools. So we're doing a lot of spatial work like this as well. I won't go into many details because it's too long a story, but these are the different categories of stone artifacts from M5. These are flakes that were used for cutting, and then we have tools that show evidence of resharpening. We have the cores that the flakes were removed from, and so we have some really interesting changes in the assemblages over this long sequence. Next, please. And I won't go through all these names, but one of the interesting things about Dmanisi is that the variety of stones that they could use was really incredible because the local geology is quite variable. So one of the things we like to do is look at what kinds of stone they chose, and at Dmanisi we have very clear patterns that their preferences for stone changed through time. So Dmanisi's record of activities indicates that they didn't do the same thing every time, but rather changed their technology and changed their raw materials to suit changing needs. So here are some of the stone artifacts from M5. These are drawings of flakes. Flakes aren't that exciting for most people, especially if you've just been to the gold treasury. But when we get back to the issue of size, archaeologists have known for decades that a cutting tool is an extremely important advantage over not having one. It means that you can go to an animal, cut the skin, and get the food out very quickly. We couldn't do that with just our bodies. So any kind of knife is a huge advantage for those people. And even pounding implements for breaking open bones to get the marrow out is also important. So even though the technology is simple, it represents a huge advantage for them. Next, please. And these are just the pictures of artifacts higher up in the sequence, showing you some of the different raw materials. Many of the best materials are represented at the site only by the finished flakes, a very high quality material. We don't have the core that they use to manufacture them. So that means that they were making good cutting implements somewhere else and bringing them to the site. That's a pretty human thing to do, is to think ahead, plan about your needs, and take the things with you that you're going to need. There were some people who still didn't think that our Homo erectus people could actually plan very far into the future, but I don't think that's true at all. These people were fully capable of getting the job done and anticipating their needs. Next, please. These are some of the common tool types that we have. Again, they're not very pretty, but notice the serrated edges here. We call these denticulants or toothed tools. And a friend of mine, Nick Toth, did experiments with his students cutting meat. And he gave half of the students a simple flake with a knife-like edge, and the other half these toothed implements. And the people with these could cut through the meat 3 times faster than the people with the regular knives. I don't know about you, but I love my serrated knives in the kitchen. It's the same thing today. So these guys made tools to process a lot of meat. Next, please. This is the main excavation area. This is where many of our human fossils were found. Next, please. And here's an example of one of the living surfaces in that part of the site. We have stone flakes. We have obviously a deer skull with the antlers. This is a rhinoceros skull turned upside down with the base of the skull broken, probably to get the brains out. These skulls were broken. Notice these large boulders, which could only get to the site by humans carrying them. There's no geologic reason to do that. And they probably, best guess is they use these in the process of breaking open bones, using them as handles. And, many of the bones in this layer show cut marks where they used flakes to cut meat off of the bone. So this is an absolutely in-place record of humans processing the deer and the rhinoceros and many other animals to get their food. Next, please. In the same area, here we have a big bone of a horse or a cow, a human tibia, the lower leg bone. That's the mandible of the jaw of that man that had no teeth. So you can see that the human bones are mixed together with the animal bones next. A few years ago, they found an elephant foot with all the bones intact, meaning that was a leg at the site. We have, I've forgotten exactly, 5 elephants. We have baby elephants and big elephants. And Martha Kaplan, my friend, thinks that elephant bone was actually broken with one of those big rocks so they could get inside to get the marrow.